Somebody's trying to get in. Okay, folks, let me just 1 second, hold this. Okay. Again, let's start this meeting, this Freedom Friday Forum. We do have now the co-host, Baba Congo Africa. He's with us, so we can go right ahead. And I'll start by greeting everyone who's on here, greeting those who are watching and listening, or however they're dealing with the live stream. And all those who want to come in, at this point in time, I can't help you. Let's see. Okay, we're good. All right, let me open up first with the official pledge to the flag, the UNIA pledge to the flag that we always do, because of course, you know, this is a UNIA Division 330 RC 2020 Freedom Friday Forum on this date of June 23rd, 2023, for the record. So now the official pledge to the flag. I commit my body, mind, and spirit to the protection, defense, and security of the red, black, and green. I dedicate my life to the redemption of Mother Africa and the liberation of her scattered Black children. I accept for myself and my descendants the teachings of universal African nationalism, and I promise that our children will be instilled with the purpose and knowledge of themselves as African people, in order that the cause of our struggle will neither falter nor fail, until all Black people are free and united through one God, one aim, one destiny. And so that those, if you're new, and for those who are not new, I reiterate the preamble of the Constitution of the UNIACL. The Universal Negro Improvement Association and African Communities League is a social, friendly, humanitarian, charitable, educational, institutional, constructive, and expansive society, and is founded by persons desiring to the utmost to work for the general uplift of the Negro peoples of the world. And the members pledge themselves to do all in their power to conserve the rights of their noble race and to respect the rights of all mankind, believing always in the brotherhood of man and the fatherhood of God. The motto of the organization is one God, one aim, one destiny. Therefore, let justice be done to all mankind, realizing that if the strong oppresses the weak, confusion and discontent will ever mark the path of man. But with love, faith, and charity towards all, the reign of peace and plenty will be heralded into the world, and the generations of men shall be called blessed. And therein is the preamble of the Constitution of the UNIACL, promulgated by our ancestors and founders in 1920. Now, I have to tell you that this is going to be a very beautiful, a very instructive, very educational,
Baba,
very exciting
for
tonight.
Mama Tendai wanted to introduce our brother.
I know.
Okay.
But also, sometimes we have to introduce things. I know that everybody wants to hear, Dr. Mwata, but let me tell you, introducing this unit, this is a matter of great concern, and I want to, if you don't mind, Dr. Mwata, I'll quote from someone who is just as good as who's been his name Amos Wilson, from his book and on the subject we're dealing here herein, so that I'll move towards what you're doing tonight. And this is what he said in about culture, consciousness, and possession. And I'll just give this one paragraph. The kind of consciousness that inhabits us largely reflects the nature of culture we live in, the nature of the culture we are a part of. Recognize, ladies and gentlemen, that culture cannot exist outside of our minds and of our bodies. Culture does not exist out there. History does not exist out there. History and culture can only exist in the minds and bodies of people. If there were no people in the world, there would be no history in the world, no culture in the world. Culture does not stand outside and direct us. It is inside of us and it directs us from the inside. Culture is instilled in our bodies and in our minds. We have to keep that in mind because sometimes we tend to see it as something separate from ourselves. That came from the Amos Wilson, famous psychiatrist, psychiatrist too, I think. And this, I think, moves right into the matter of our guest here this evening, Dr. Mwata, here in Washington. And I will turn this over to our good sister, Mama Tendai, to introduce our good doctor. Mama Tendai?
Greetings, everyone. I just wanted to take the time to introduce the brother properly because of the things that he has accomplished. As the past president of the Black Psychologists, I think it's important for us to understand that it is the Black psychologists that were able to get post-traumatic slave syndrome as a recognized actual disorder. Basically meaning that clinically, we know that it exists and that there are remedies for being able to address it, but that in truth, it actually is an illness. So he has devoted his life, basically his latter parts of his life and his teachings and whatnot to address this issue, which he refers to as not post, it's persistent, that it continues, and because we are traumatized each and every day of our lives. Baba Mwata, of course, has appeared on places like Roland Martin, BET, a number of other kinds of things that he's been involved in. And he currently is head of the Sociology and Psychology Department at Grambling State. I want to say that because you know I'm saying woo woo for my HBCUs for having good sense to be able to hire this brother. And he's a Fulbright Hayes Scholar with his focus on healing and restructuring of the post-apartheid South Africa. It was in Tanzania where he researched Ubuntu, which you will hear him refer to in his talk this evening, and how it can inform mental health service delivery to people of African ancestry. Not only does he work on healing of the psycho-spiritual wounds that are present within people, within us, as a result of the cultural and historical trauma that we have endured that has become basically epigenetic. Basically, we're carrying it through our genes, and then it's reinforced each and every day of our lives as we live under a Eurocentric construct. That the work that he is doing is critical to not only his advancing this concept that he has done, but basically it is critical for us to be able to do the repair that we need to do as an African people in order for us to come together as one and to unite as Nkrumah has instructed us and as we've been talking about but not doing, to be able to move our people forward and to accept our the positions where we're supposed to be, not as the tail end, but rather the leaders of a just society and the upliftment of people of African descent. So I want to say that the brother advances culturally relevant trauma-informed care and interventions, which he's saying need to be utilized by psychotherapists, and it's culturally inclusive, particularly to people of African descent, because you know we don't usually get things that are devoted or designed for our upliftment and for our healing. But that's what this brother is doing. And so without further ado, I introduce you to my beloved Dr. Mwata Kairi.
Hey, thank you so much, family, for inviting me to be a part of this conversation. Baba Mwata, Dr. Amos Wilson. I'm actually here doing this work in part because of his leadership, his guidance. Following his work, we talk about the awakening the Black genius, natural genius in Black children, countering the idea of Black on Black violence and servitude of white domination. Has various books about all history, psychohistory. So I am a student of Dr. Wilson. Again, I met him through Adasi, so I have to acknowledge that connection. And so he is always ever speaking to me. If not in spirit, I'll hear in his speeches. So thank you for that reminder of what he speaks about. And then, of course, the UNIA, the discourse about the one aim, one destiny, the one God construct, the idea of where we're going, who we are, what we are all about. The Pan-African national agenda is real. And that is one of our major issues. We don't know who we are, what we're fighting for. We simply are trying to coexist. And I don't know anybody that's finding a way to coexist with the cancer. You want to eradicate the cancer, but we're trying to somehow coexist with that which is destroying us. That's a madness, a sickness within and of itself. But that wasn't what I was talking about. That's just simply saying thank you all for that, and thank you, family, for allowing me to be here. I'm partly at Grambling at this point. I'm no longer the chair of the psychology department, but I'm tied to HBCU's Mount and Die. Because my parents met at an HBCU, Grambling State University. I graduated from Grambling State University, so I'm forever connected to the institutions. I allowed certain things to transition, and so I wanted to be able to do a little something differently. So I'm no longer the chair of that department, but I'm ever engaged in making sure that we are uplifting our people in consciousness. I've been working on this, been a part of this process of understanding African consciousness since I was in graduate school, understanding who we are as a people. And it was when I heard the voices of Dr. Wade Nobles and Dr. Naeem Akbar, and hearing Dr. Ivan Van Sertima and Yosef Ben Yakanan, and hearing Dr. John Henry Clark, and hearing them have the conversations about who we are and what we're all about, that I began to see something in psychology. And I recognize that we cannot continue to utilize European nomenclature, their discussion to describe an African and or Black phenomenon. And it is a sad situation that we continually utilize their lingua franca. So we talk about having post stuff, post-traumatic slave syndrome, post whatever everyone's saying, and it becomes difficult for me to understand the post when I understand the history of the term, because we have to learn about this in graduate school. So we learned that there was this, of course, this conversation in the 1760s with an Austrian physician talking about military soldiers coming home with some aspect of nostalgia and something about their mindset being upset, disrupted. And in the 1900s, 1915, 16, somewhere along there was a discussion about the term shell shock. And it was saying that individuals that came back from the military, they had this diagnosis of what was called shell shock, appeared in a book called, an article called The Lancet. And so they were suggesting that individuals came back from war and they had this shell shock phenomena. And it was in 1919, Woodrow Wilson talked about what was later to be known as PTSD and how to help veterans come back and re-enter in war from war. And there was the 1960s, we see the term PTSD in 1950s, 60s, enters into the nomenclature of post-traumatic, and it was first describing individuals who had encountered some aspect of war. And so it's saying that once they have come back from war, now we have to help them to readjust from the situations that they had encountered. And so that was the issue of post. And so then later in the 60s, maybe look at how it also informed how we look at people who were adjusting from situations that were very challenging. And so they started including constructs that ideas such as rape and molestation and those kind of things. And that's how it morphed. Again, it was the people had gone through the thing and then they were being treated after the thing, thus the term post. And so when I began to examine it, I began to realize that something is wrong with the term when we are forever in a situation where there's something coming against us. and that is debilitating us, that's challenging our psyche, that's disrupting our sense of well-being. And so that meant that we cannot have a post, and we have to stop trying to utilize the oppressor's language, the oppressor's constructs. Now we are stuck at some level for we use the oppressor's language in this conversation. So we're challenged that way, but where we can, we should be able to exercise some thoughts, some ideas. And so we have things like Dr. Marubani suggesting to us, Urugu and the incomplete being conversation. We have all of these conversations that we need to engage in that normalize us back into who we really are. And thus, I challenge the idea of post when it is persistent. It's something that is ongoing. So it's persistent. The main part is enslavement. Systemic trauma. I want to catch this part. Enslavement systemic trauma is critical because it is the enslavement ideology of white supremacy that also is a part of white terrorism that goes against a population. It is systemic. I don't care what we do, and it's what Brother Neely Fuller says, and Dr. Francis Cress Welsing echoed it. It's in every people activity that we engage in. Thus, it is systemic, whether it's politics, wars, and love. It's in every aspect of our lives, this idea of white supremacy notion. And then it is traumatizing, and not the issue of traumatizing to our mental well-being. For African people, the traumatization comes in the context of spirit. And so we're talking then about essence being disrupted. What is essence that's being disrupted? No matter what we do, we never seem to measure up. Trauma. What name do I give my child once that child is born? Because the child has to navigate a space. Trauma. What clothes do I put on so that I can look normal? Trauma. What foods do I eat when I go to certain places? Trauma. Do I get a watermelon when I'm out with white people? Trauma. It's all these things are perpetual elements of trauma going on within the psyche of a population. And we have to be able to understand that it is persisting. It is something ongoing. And when we recognize that it's ongoing, at that point, we can begin to talk about how do we adjust? How do we treat it? How do we begin to tweak it in a way that makes it make sense? And so I love the conversation that you mentioned, Mama Tendai, the epigenetic discourse that that trauma has been shown. And they started off talking about this within Jews, a part of the Jewish Holocaust. And then when we start talking about it, then it's questionable, right? It's but Diaz and Resler brought it back again and said, let's look at this in mice. And he showed again where mice were shocked and given a certain smell, and they had a visceral response, and their offspring would smell the smell, and the offspring would have a visceral response without being shocked, and those offspring would have offspring. Therefore, there was some adaptation to the traumatizing experience that was passed down. And that part right there was quite enlightening. It suggested that something in the essence of the mouse gave it something to pass on to say, be aware of what you can encounter when this happens. And it came to life at that point, the construct of stay woke. The construct of stay woke is past participle in the present about the future. It says that there's something that's going on and you must be aware of it and it's coming against you. But my real question is, what is that thing that is doing the informing? See, that is the thing that as healers, we have to be able to speak to, because also Resler says that there's a way to pass on adjustment and adaptation to traumatizing experiences, and that can be passed on genetically as well. And too often we focus on the trauma, but not deal with the adjustment piece. Give you an example. W. Du Bois talks about double consciousness, and he talks about two warring souls going back and forth, right? Waiting not to be torn asunder, right? Two Negroes, to whatever it is, right? And so the idea here is that I always ask the question, who is observing the two? Because if Brother Sungar and I are in battle, we're doing something, I can't see two people. All I can see is him. All he can see is me. So who is the third? Only some moments that I can see is two fools going back and forth. We can't see that, which means then that even in the construct of double consciousness, there's a third reality observing a phenomenon. And that, I submit, is our African essence, saying you are warring, you are going through all this stuff because you don't know who you are. And so this is the major element of the trauma. So that's why we call it persistent enslavement, systemic trauma. It's ongoing, and we have to understand how to eradicate it from that. Events of trauma. Media projects perpetually Black inferiority. No matter where we go, that happens over and over again. If you have a particular movie or something that may depict something with Black or Africanity in it, you can bet that there's going to be made mockery of somewhere about the Africanity. Educational systems project European superiority throughout the entire curriculum. That is a whole conversation right now of the attack on banning the books, because the books they desire to have in place are about European superiority, and the books that they're banning are just simply challenging the whole idea that is the only thing that's superior white. Because in truth, if we really begin to examine with any real, we don't have to go deeper with it. We said, but we can stay on the surface and analyze for ourselves the dynamics of the African spirit when we see the inventions that we've created. And the question becomes, where did the idea for the inventions come from? They had to have come from the divine. Talk from a stoplight we love to talk about during Black History Month, from the Banneker City, as my brother always reminds us of Banneker City. Benjamin Banneker designing the city after L'Enfant left with the plans. The brother had the mindset to do so. The brother Benjamin Banneker invented the first clock that ran that kept time for 40, 50 years without missing a particular second. Right, and I have watches now, and every last one of them get off. So the point is that right there it speaks volumes of the divine to Gladys West, and talk about GPS system that we use today from the alarm systems within people's houses and invented by a sister, right? All of these things were created, and they came from the genius of a population. And all we continue to do is simply suggest what we don't have. So education systems project this idea of inferiority of African, superiority of whiteness. That is traumatizing, because now I grow up thinking that I'm less than, and so I can identify with being something other than human. I can identify with being an N, B, and an H. I can be those things because I don't have anything to attach to, while at the same time, the oppressor has this ego-aggrandizement piece going on, where they are the best, the only, the first that have ever done anything. I don't care what movie you look at. When they show up in the movie, they save the day. They're the last Mohican. They're the last samurai. They're the best Avatar. Right? They are Superman, the biggest lies, and they come through the context of education systems. So we learn these things. We also begin to believe ourselves to be inferior. They tell the lie so big, Brother Musa. They talk about the Super Bowl. They talk about the World Series in baseball, and nobody in the world is playing. It's just folks in the United States. Right? The World Cup, it speaks to the World Cup. Everybody in the world has a chance to, at some level, if you have a little squad, or you put together somebody and get a ball and try it out and see what happens, right? Every country can get in. But where's the world in the World Series? Lying. The Great Lakes. What Great Lakes? Those are little ponds compared to what we see over in ancient Kemet, right? We have to be clear about the perpetual process of this raping and pillaging of a population to believe that they are inferior, when in reality, if you look at Lake Tanganyika, now we're talking about a lake. We go to places in Africa. Now we have some waterways. These little ponds are just simply ponds, right? And so we have to recognize that education systems do a wonderful job of pillaging and traumatizing the psyche of our children. And then we have people in our own HBCUs fighting us to bring such content to life. Well, they have to have the regular curriculum. Clown, do you not know the regular curriculum is that which is destroying our people in the first place? Come on now. Anyway, disparities in healthcare. Ask yourself, why is it that we are dying from all of the preventable diseases? Diabetes, hypertension, right? There is an agenda. That is traumatizing. Research indicated individuals were going for a checkup because they had the symptoms of a heart attack. And this was done at a cardiologist conference. It was a mock research. They had individuals present these symptoms in a video and had doctors to prescribe what should happen next. And when that person was white and they had the same script that they were reading from, the people on an image describing their heart attack symptoms, when a white person described the symptoms, the white doctors mostly gave them the diagnosis of a heart attack and gave them the prescription as what to do for that. And when it was black or brown, they said that they were having symptoms of heartburn and gave them, and they had the exact same script. Because why? There is an agenda for the destruction and killing of a population, even in healthcare. So we have to ask ourselves, right? Who are we, and what are we going to do about this when we know that Vivian was the first person to ever cure the dynamic of blue babies, right? Something that they were suffering from. We know about the separation of the twins, right? All these things were done by African genius, and yet we suffer. Charles Drew and blood plasma and a crossing and the high blood pressure cup, Patricia Bath and the cataract machine, the stethoscope. We can go ad nauseum in health, and we have done all those things, and yet we suffer because of a system of traumatizing African reality. Economic injustices, right? An entire economy was built on the gold standard. The gold standard had to be from gold. The gold primarily had to come from what's called the Gold Coast. The Gold Coast is in West Africa. Thus, the entire world predicated its entire economy on what came out of the continent of Africa and its people. Because the human cargo, that was also part of commerce. Free trade agreement was part of trading and swapping enslaved Africans. That's how they built their economy, on the gold and the people coming from the continent. And yet we suffer from economic inequities in a space. Even to this day, we have countries, France and others, raping and pillaging the Congo and Burkina Faso and other folks telling them to get out because they're doing we have this, the UK doing this thing in the US, right? And these economic inequities, those are elements of trauma. When we have to suffer from a FICO score conversation. Why is it that my FICO score goes up when I get in debt? Because it means then now I'm in chain, I'm locked to you, I'm enslaved to you, I'm a sharecropper to your reality. Racial profiling, right? Excessive involvement in the penal system. When we understand in this country that when there was a freeing of enslaved Africans in this country, allegedly freeing them immediately, there was trumped up charges created on people to put them right back into prison again. And thus the book called Slavery by Another Name, it reveals it very well, that says that enslavement became a penal system became another way of creating a plantation. And that's why it even says in the Constitution that people are free with only to the extent that they have not committed some form of a crime. And people can find crimes on people all the time, and they were doing it quite often. Mothers were raped and pillaged. We have a postcard of one where this one mother was raped because they said that her son stole some bread, and she said my son did not steal from your store. She protected her son. They lynched him and lynched her, and she was raped by over 100 women before she was lynched. And they have both of them on a postcard, and that narrative is there. How sick is that, right? That's traumatizing, excessive involvement in the penal system, mental health misdiagnosis, right? And political disenfranchisement. And we're still stuck on trying to make somebody do right that is hell-bent on doing wrong. So these are dynamics and elements of trauma, gerrymandering, right? And fighting, and think about this. Listen to how traumatizing this is. Vote or die, right? Vote because your life depends on it. Think about the idea of your ancestors died for the right to vote. In all of those elements, it is an element of trauma that is mentioned. Vote or die. Vote like your life depends on it. You're gonna get killed. There's a lynch mob coming for you. Your ancestors died, and I will submit to you that they did not die for the right to vote. They would die for the right to be human, and yet we desire somehow to go back to being inhumane. So when we talk about post and persistent enslavement systemic trauma, we have to be clear about what we're saying. We're saying that this traumatizing element is there, and we have to be able to acknowledge it. because you can't go to a doctor and get healed and get well without acknowledging what is there. And some call it transgenerational trauma. When we talk about African psychology, and then we open up for discussion. There's so much more I love to talk about. We have to talk about what are we going to do about it. First of all, we have to recognize that when we talk about African psychology, we're talking about a branch of psychology that looks at that spirit is in all aspects of life. The word psyche comes from a word psyku out of ancient Kemet, which means that the essence of life, or that which inspires life. So that means then that the word psyche is really about spirit and essence and beingness. That we understand everybody has a particular journey. In the Yoruba tradition, talks about the issue, the concept of Ori. Everybody has a destiny. Everybody has a journey that they're on. We all here for a purpose, and we recognize the spiritual journey. Thus, we understand that we are spiritual beings having the experience of being human, right? We facilitate movement towards the creator, that everybody is moving to become more like that which created them. So this is part of the African psychology model. This is not Western, this is not European psychology. This is our stuff, right? We help people to understand the power and strength in their journey. That we often become so overwhelmed with the negatives that we build our entire lives around negative. And that's where we find addictions, and that's where we find abuses and so forth and so on, because we are so attached to anxiety. We're so attached to despair, a disorder. Think about the sitcom Good Times. What good ever happened on Good Times? A paradox, always something negative happening, right? Rock, whoa, 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 something is negative happening. So we have all of these constant narratives, misery, whoa, misery is me, it's coming on us. And so we don't recognize the power and strength in our journeys, and we keep people aligned to their purpose. We make people recognize that, listen, you are here for a purpose, even though these things that happen to you in your legacy, in your lineage, and the Bantu Congo construct of Makolo. Makolo means knots. And so they said that we have a biogenetic rope that we're part of. And these knots, these Makolo, are traumatic experiences that come. And our job is not only to untie the knots that have been there prior to us getting here, right? Undoing some of the things that traumatized our ancestors and so forth, and family stuff, but also to make sure that we don't put more knots in the biogenetic rope for those coming after us. So remind people of their profound purpose. And the last point is to acknowledge that people do indeed have purpose. People don't even recognize that, and it sounds so trite. You know, they have a purpose. No, we are here because we are on a journey to fulfill a mission. And once that mission is fulfilled, then we move on to the next phase of life, right? And so this is the essence of African psychology, challenging the persistent enslaved systemic trauma. So I will pause it there.
Wow.
Comment? Brother Julius, Mink
Sorry,
here.
yeah, I was muted.
You know, Edward Bynum put out a book, Edward Bynum, psychologist, called The African Unconscious. And he goes into the psychology of us as a people who emerged from Homo erectus to Homo habilis to Homo sapiens sapien. And all the traumas that have happened to us are encoded in our genetic memories. But our salvation comes from understanding we came out of Africa. That we came out of Africa as an independent, sovereign people with a soul and a spirit, and our ability to control ourselves socially and to live in a realm of what was not termed democracy at that time, but an equality between ourselves and nature. Now, Bynum says this is part of our African unconscious, that we have to be able to restore back in ourselves in order to replace the traumas that are constantly being placed upon us that Brother Washington just spoke about. The traumas have been ongoing, and they've been ongoing from Homo erectus to today. I'll leave that at that.
So I read Brother Bynum's work, and I use his book in many of my classes. And so the content is spot on, that there is this encoding of course, of the trauma that we've encountered. And what is so amazing to me is what is doing the encoding, right? That part right there is so critical, because we can talk about what was encoded, but how did it get there? Because if once you understand that, then there's an understanding of how the healings will take place, because that same recorder will record anything that is placed there. So the adaptation to the trauma is there for us to navigate it, so that when we get to the next level, we will be able to survive, to move forward. The issue is we don't know how to honor the essence that's given us the information. So we spend more time reacting as opposed to responding. We spend more time trying to avert pain as opposed to trying to figure out what is it and then to heal and move forward. So we spend a lot of time. I don't have time for the pain. I don't have time to talk about it. I don't have time to talk about a lot of things. I don't have time to talk about that black stuff. I need to see, we are avoiding something, but in that conversation, as he said, when you recognize that you are part of something greater than your traumatic experiences, that's the power. So you mentioned, well, you know that you are part of an African continent. Well, we learned then that Africa is backwards and is diseased. And so the BBC and CNN and everybody else puts this old images of black babies with flies around their mouths and swollen bellies and perpetual fighting and strife and all of that. But then when I get off the plane, I see Europeans all over the place, and I don't see those same swollen. I'm not saying people are not hungry. I'm simply saying I don't see what they are showing all the time. I see Europeans over there building their wealth. When you recognize that you are part of that, it changes everything. Brother Congo, it was amazing how we had a brother, we talk about going to the Gambia. You say, man, ain't going over, ain't nothing over there. You don't know why y'all going over there. Ain't nothing over there. Everything's over here. And so then I showed him a picture of the airplane and these flight attendants that were black. Oh, brother, I need to go over there. Like, wow, well, he saw the black sisters. Now I'm saying you want to go. But the point we're making is that where did he get the information that there was nothing there, when the same information is available to him that's available to you and I? That Madagascar and tea, that Kenya, Ethiopia, Uganda, and coffee. And coffee is the #1 crack around the entire world, right? Folks are making money on that, and they want to always talk about Colombia, but the vast amount of the coffee comes out of Ethiopia, Uganda, and Kenya. So we have to be able to make those kind of connections. Why is it so important to make a connection to the resources? Because it begins to suggest to us that if we can see how the divine provided resources on the continent and provide resources for us in the here and now in our various inventions, we are perpetually getting the information we need to liberate ourselves. But we don't see it, we don't recognize it, because we've been conditioned to disown it, to disdain it, to disavow it, because it ain't nothing. So we give up jazz music, we give up rhythm and blues, we give up all of these things because we've been told that it's nothing. What kind of cooking exists in the United States if it was not for Africans? There's no Southern cuisine, no Southern cooking without an African reality. The white men call themselves steermen. They didn't call themselves cowboys. So who were the cowboys that had open range grazing for the cattle? Where'd the longhorn come from? Right? So we recognize that God has given all of these things, or the creator, Oludumare and Kulukulu, whatever you want to call that entity, that is always providing over and over and over again. And that's why I mentioned the inventions of the cell phone technology and the tantalite inside of the cell phone and computer. All these things are coming out of the continent of Africa. We recognize that the creator is giving you all of this stuff, then everything you need is right there. But as long as we believe ourselves to be N, B's, and H's, ain't about nothing, right? We turn our backs to it, and they get wealthy off of it. The Queen of England's helmet or crown is made of gold. It has jewels that have come from the continent of Africa. These are all facts. This is not made up stuff, right? And so we have to be able to do a better job to say, now, if the resources are on the land, they've been been provided to the people, then the people also have to be wealthy to be able to have access to those things. So we have access to wealth, but we have some economic poverty going on because the mindset is all twisted because of trauma. So you can have it right in front of you and cannot see it. The Wiz gave a classic example of it with Michael Jackson being the scarecrow and the crows standing around saying, you can't win, you can't get over, and you can't get out of the game. And every time he pulled everything out of him, he pulled all the knowledge out of himself and quoted everything in the world. But they kept saying, the crows kept saying, you can't win, you can't get over, and you can't get out of the game. That's the tape that they want us to play over and over and over and over again in the educational system. You've never done anything. You've never been anything. You never have done anything of great and valiant work. All you've been is a banjo playing, watermelon seed spitting, pickaninny, and that's all it is that you will ever be. That's traumatizing. So Bynum hits it right on the mark when we begin to recognize that we are, as Dr. Fukuyama says, a seed of a seed of a seed of a seed of the seed. It changes everything. Yes, Brother Julius. Thank you so much, Brother Julius. Brother Congo, Africa.
Okay. Thank you, my brother.
Mm-hmm.
Brother Congo is saying something?
Has his hand up.
Oh, okay. All righty. Where is he?
I don't know, but while he's
Oh, okay. Baba Congo, would you like to say something right now? Your hand. I have no idea what happened there.
Once you go, you got
No
three
idea what
hands.
happened. Okay. All right. Well,
You got three hands up.
Okay.
You may be having a problem. Okay. Mama Tendai.
All right.
I was just going to build on, he made reference to Baba Fukuyama. So I want to say something what Dr. Fukuyama says. You are not of today. You are not of yesterday. You are not of 100 years ago. You are the living, divine energy that has existed since the beginning of time.
Mm-hmm.
Which is what I think that Brother Julius and Dr. Mwata both are saying, and getting that and understanding that, because I'm seeing it too. I'm trying to talk to these little HBCUs and say, why do you think the money is now being made available, that all this money is coming into the HBCUs? Because you are the creative energy of the universe. And folk are at a standpoint. And if the United States trying to make sure that they remain number one in the world, they've got to use your creative energies and the things that you make, that you create, that you develop to be able to move forward, because they can't do it. They can only synthesize.
Baba Congo, you had your hand up?
Yes. I find that I find a lot of people downplay our history a whole lot for their convenience. They like to buy $200 tennis shoes that don't make them jump any higher, instead of buying the stock that produce that tennis shoes. We like to buy the most expensive cars, transportation, and clothes. And although I'm in the industry, I find people buying more house than they really need to have. Everybody wants to buy $1 million and $2 million houses, and live that lifestyle. And what it is that those of us who are fortunate to make some money, most of it I find that is squandered, because the people who have those money were not really taught of the proper history, and we're enslaved if we don't watch it, because if we go to college, if we don't do it right, we come up with $100,000 debt, which is another enslavement to pay. And then we put ourselves in more debt the lifestyle that we want to live, keeping up with the Joneses for no reason, but they don't see that as an enslavement. They don't see that behavior as an enslavement. And I mean, in my lifetime, I've been trying to tell people like, hey, don't put yourself in an enslavement type of position. As a matter of fact, I'm glad that a lot of people are becoming entrepreneurs, but a lot of people prefer to be employed and told what to do and discriminated on the job, that they don't get increase. And so I say, hey, if you started your own company, you're not going to discriminate against yourself, and also you'll be hiring more people that look like you to fight racism and fight capitalism. Because the only time capitalism was really profitable is in a real sense is when we were enslaved. And so therefore we have to change that behavior by teaching the history and telling people like, hey, stop buying the cognac and bragging that you have all the best whiskey and the best vodka and all that stuff. Modify our behavior so that we don't enslave ourselves and don't perpetuate that.
Brother Conker, I would like to comment on several things you said because the point is well made, and that I would start from the cognac conversation that I learned recently, that cognac became the thing for Black folks when the brothers were doing the war, World War II. I'm going to go out there and say that one, when they were when France used to take wine and they were stored in these barrels, and sometimes what would come out of that would be this thing that was called cognac. And so they got a taste for cognac, and when they got back to the United States, white did not want Blacks to drink the same thing that they drink, so they controlled the whiskey, and the bourbon even had things called rebel whiskey. And so a sense of well-being or a sense of purpose came through cognac, because when they were over in Europe, they were treated better. And so the association with the cognac and African humanity was made. And so they began to have this affinity for the cognac. And I want to make sure we get to make this make sense, because a lot of things that sometimes we attack, we don't catch it. And not that you attacked it, we don't catch it. What does it mean? It means that when I have this cognac, and then Hennessy started putting money into the Black community, and others putting money into the Black community, advertising in Black magazines, while those other folks would not do so. And so that became the attachment again, that my humanity was tied to get in the cognac. And so again, we are finding these pseudo modalities for rehumanizing ourselves. And so whether we're talking about going out buying, as you mentioned, buying things that we don't need to impress people that we don't like with money that we don't even have, that's the same phenomena, because we're trying to find ways to be human because we have been dehumanized. That is why we advocate for Ubuntu psychotherapy. So our idea of Ubuntu psychotherapy is not predicated on a white notion of what it means to feel, to work through your problems, that kind of stuff. Ubuntu really alludes to this idea of being human. People reduce it down to I am because we are, therefore I am. It's bigger than that construct, because when we hear Desmond Tutu talk about it, he says it's about humanity. It's about doing well to others. It's about expressing yourself. It's about coming up a human in spite of all things that come against your own humanity. So Ubuntu is bigger than that. Goodwill says that it is beneficence. It is kind. It is generosity. It's those things. When you talk about how Black folks were able to get over in the horrific conditions, it had to have been a thing called Ubuntu. Ubuntu talks about this issue of connectedness. And so sometimes we have rituals of connectedness that be in the form of cognac drinking, of other things. And a brother was just talking today about a birthday had come up, and he told him, I'm going to do double shots. And so they were double shotting, and now I had a good time. It was ritual, but they didn't understand what they were doing. And so their ritual was misappropriated. And so it was a humanizing moment. When our people understand that Our connectivity is in our essence, our beingness. My brother mentioned blacktricity. It's in that element of beingness, and that's where we find our greatest humanity as Africans. We find it in this idea of the collective, not the so-called individual. Even the word individual is in, which means not. D-I-V-I, divide or split, D-U-A-L, duality. It means a duality that can never be split. So even in that term, it speaks of a two-ness that is there, but not in this idea of just simply me, but my worth, my value comes in the context of we. That I have purpose and meaning, that we can talk all day long. I could talk in my room about the same things, but something when we talk about this together, it has new meaning. This is what we have to do. So our people then have learned to have been disconnected from humanity. And we found these pseudo ways of connecting, these false ways of connecting. Cognac is one way, bleaching the skin, straightening the hair, changing the dialect, altering the curriculum, trying to acquiesce and accommodate a political system, trying to navigate a legal system. All of these things have been pseudo ways of trying to have some element of humanity. And so, well, I'm just as good as you, right? My mother told me that she didn't want her child to go to an HBCU because she wanted the folks to know that her child could survive at their school just as like they could. I'm like, that doesn't even make any sense. What are we proving something to do? Whites are not my parents. I got Bobby and Claudius Washington. Those are my parents. That's it. And grandparents and outside of that. But we spend more time trying to prove something to somebody that doesn't even want to see it in the first place. How are you going to prove something to somebody that doesn't want to see it? And then when you spend your time doing so, what they're going to say is, look at them. They're trying to impress me. Therefore, I have the power. No, the real power resides within us, because there's nothing that they've been able to do that has been able to skirt the genius of African people. And so we have to recognize that we don't find our power in a bottle of cognac, in a $50 cigar, in some clothes, in a house that we live in some German car that we drive, that Germans don't like us in the first place. We don't find our value and worth in any of those things. We don't find our value and worth in the educational system. If the curriculum is not affirming our identity, it's teaching us to hate ourselves. So even there, it's not going to be there. It's not found in a religion. In Ifa, in Khan, in Asar Set, in Baptists, and Buddhists, and Daoists, and Confucianism. It's not found there. If it's found in one place, we'd all be healed by now, right? So we have to recognize that the elements of our humanity is an amalgamation of all of those things. Our spirit, our spirituality, our essence, our divine purpose, our worth and value came to us from the Creator. The only thing we need to be stopping and giving honor to is not the white folk. We need to give honor and praise to the Creator and our ancestors. That's our first leg of our first act. How many of our people recognize that they are an extension of those that came before them? We have our children saying, I'm not my ancestors. I wouldn't have taken that. You have no idea of the true story. You don't know what people have gone through. We have our own children don't know what we've been through in our own lifestyle, let alone talk about generational stuff that has taken place, right? And so you're correct. We try to humanize through false avenues, false venues. But the true truth comes in when we recognize who we really are. And so I wanted to say that there's some powerful effects of these traumas that take place. There's the allostatic load that happens. That is, that there's this high stress level that comes upon us over a period of time of trying to survive the elements of trauma and distress. Elevated levels of cortisol, it leads to overeating and obesity. It leads also to high blood pressure and poor glucose regulation and craving for sugars, which attributes to diabetes. Lower immune system resistance and inflammation, increased odds of developing various types of diseases. And so this allostatic load is there. So every time we encounter these various elements of trauma, that we have this allostatic load wearing us down. And so we have all of these diseases. We have, again, coronary heart disease, which is attributed to plaque in the arteries, and plaque in the arteries is contributed to cortisol level increasing within the bloodstream. And cortisol level increases because of a stress response caused by adrenaline and noradrenaline, and that is for a fight or flight mechanism. If you do not fight or flight, then you're going to have this buildup and you have to burn off the adrenaline. If you don't burn off the adrenaline, the cortisol builds up, the plaque is there, the heart and the arteries, and thus you have death. What kills us? Racism and oppression is killing us, and we do not identify it as such. And so we talk about, I ain't eating all that, I'm not doing all, I'm not moving that much. It don't take all of that. That's what we want to say. And want to talk about being a health nut. Well, if doing stuff that's killing you, drinking and smoking and eating whatever you want to eat is being a health nut. I mean, it's what you call healthy, then I'm going to be a health nut. And so we have to recognize then that there are a variety of things that we need to address that's killing us. Adrenaline, the adrenal gland sits on top of the kidney. And so if we think about within our Black community right now, we have a lot of dialysis centers because of, again, kidney failure due to the dynamics of stress, of racism, of oppression. So this idea of talking about healing or through Ubuntu and looking at persistent slave systemic trauma is something that helps us to be able to deal with the here and now, and our coping mechanisms further kill us. So we want to smoke something and get high. All right, a period of time, get high because you feel low from what? You want to numb yourself from the pain by drinking excessive alcohol. You want to escape here's one for Black men trying to somehow escape in the wombs of a whole bunch of women trying to be reborn again. Hold up, brother, you all over the place. So we have all of these coping mechanisms that are actually killing us because we don't recognize that there's a traumatizing experience in our lives, in our psyche, in our spirit. When we get to that, so you can't that's why they even call alcohol spirits, trying to re-spiritualize, right? We're trying to re-spiritualize in wombs. We're trying to re-spiritualize through sex. We're trying to re-spiritualize through smoking and snorting and so forth and so on. You can't get there because there is no there through those false mechanisms. The body already makes its own getting high stuff. There's the endorphins, which is in the body, morphine, already there within the body. So you don't have to go try to get it, it's there. The nicotinic receptors are inside the body, so we're trying to get it through nicotine. It's already there. See, these are the things when we talk about the issue of trauma, we talk about trauma adjustment. So you mentioned cognac. Cognac is one way of numbing the pain. Smoking is one way. Black men were able to go in other places and have sexual relations with white women. That was another way of humanizing. Right, I can get with the white woman over here. All those things are things that we're using, and they're not solving the problem. A salve, right? It is not remedying it because we don't identify the true problem. We live in a society, Brother Congo, that talks about how to cure the symptom due to the thing, and not deal with the thing itself. And the thing itself is the doses of Black hatred that we have learned. We've learned to despise that which we see in the mirror. Dr. Wade Nobles tells us about the making of a sheepdog. A sheepdog is taken away from its mother when it is born and made to suckle at the breast of a sheep. So it grows up thinking that it is a sheep. It will use all of its dog instincts to protect the safety and sanctity of the sheep. You put another dog in the pen with it, it will attack and kill it because it believes that it's coming against the sheep. It will attack and kill its own biological mother. But the worst part of the story is that you put a mirror in front of it and it will attack its own image. This is the making of a sheepdog. And so we have to recognize that a part of the Urugu process, a part of the trauma is that we don't know who we are. And if we don't know who we are, we in trouble. My grandmother said, you got to be who you is and not who you ain't. Because if you be who you ain't gonna be nobody. And so our wellness model, we talk about Dr. Fukia, he talks about Ngolo's Ndakina. Ngolo's Ndakina is a natural healing potential that's within us. Ubuntu says, how do we tap into the natural healing potential, the wellness, that we are spiritual beings and we have this capacity to heal. And this Ngolo is the natural healing thing. When you cut yourself and under normal conditions, the blood coagulates and then heals underneath it, then a scab is there. That's what we have for spirit. Our inner divine presence is there. We have to have the proper instructions and information there to bring about that healing. But Brother Senghor, many of us, as I've said before, are just junkies on hearing information. We want to hear a whole lot of stuff. That's like taking a vitamin on an empty stomach. And we don't recognize that vitamins are supplements. You take a vitamin on an empty stomach and you will feel some real pain, because the vitamin is not the thing. The vitamin helps the body utilize the food that is within the body in a more efficient way. So you got to have a supplement, right? The content, the information is supplemental, but you already have to be doing the work for yourself, already ingesting elements of self-love, of appreciation, adoration for your own Blacknificence. See, this is what Ubuntu talks about. How do you honor your own journey? So when you hear information, I-N, form, shape, ation, the process of something that shapes your inner being. When you get some information, what is it attaching to? There's a supplement people use when they're bodybuilding called creatine. And creatine is you consume it and it allows your body to take water in and it fills in the muscles, right? But if you don't go lift, if you don't have some resistance, you take some creatine, it ain't gonna do a thing because it has nothing to work with, right? And so my point is that the work, we keep trying to get supplements and hoping that gets us through. We dance, we sing, we shout. These are supplements, right? We scream, we pray. These are supplements. But if there is an empty vessel, if there's nothing already within, if there's a belief of my worthlessness, then all of those things simply are going on and we move on. People can go hear a speech, can go hear a sermon and not tell you what was said 5 minutes later because they were empty. And it didn't go in and fortify to build anything, to make anything become better. It just went in and went out. But when there's some substance there, when we're doing our study and our research, who am I? Why am I here? What am I all about? Frantz Fanon said we have to ask the question, who am I? Am I who I say I am? And am I all I ought to be, right? 3 critical questions. Who am I? Am I who I say I am? Am I all I ought to be? Ubuntu tells us about the issue of our connectedness, our divinity. We are tied to those that came before us. You be you, being into you, the unifying life force that's within everything around us. That's your Blacktricity, Brother Senghor. It runs through everything around us. That's the connectivity into you. But if you are not connected to the ancestors, the Abadlozi, the Abapanzi, if you're not connected to Nkulu Kulu, a God concept, then you empty. There's nothing there. That's why they ask the question in Zulu, Sawubona, do you have a presence? Or the question is not how are you doing? Do you have a presence? Some say it means I see you, but the word bukona or kona means presence. So if you have kona inside of a word hyphenated, sawubona, sanubona, it is actually sani, do you, do we, or are we present? Because I can see you if you are present. How are you present? You are present to the extent that you are connected to those around you, those that have gone before you and those that are coming after you. But if you don't have a sense of obligation and duty and responsibility to all of that, then I can't see you. See, Ubuntu says you got to get back connected. That's why we pour libation for the ones that are not here. It's a moment of connectivity, right? That's the connectedness that we have to get to. That's what Ubuntu says, and that's how we begin to deal with the persistent enslavement systemic trauma, because that trauma is designed to sever us from our connectivity to one another and to the Creator, to the ancestors. So we have to operate from a disconnected perspective. So that's why we talk about ritual. That's why the ritual in the beginning was so important. But Messiah, it was important because we have to recognize what did Garvey say before, so that we know why the UNI is here. What are we going to teach? What are we going to do? How are we going to function? How are we to live? What's our responsibility? What's our obligation? Uplift Africa, teach our children. That's in the obligation. So now when I leave, I got to remember, I got to go do this. I got to study to be able to tell them something. I got to afford it. See, that's ritual. That's connectedness. But it's your thing. Do what you want to do is a disconnected reality. Right? And that is not African. So we then talk about how do you connect? That's our healing. It is in the connectedness of ourselves to one another, to those that have gone before us and those that are coming after us. It's connected to the ancestors and to our God concept. There's a hand up. I don't, brother, President
Yeah,
General, you've been up for a long time.
PG, yes.
Well, yes, sir. But my being up was because I was listening and being connected. But the thrust here is I want to take take all that's been said and then begin to look at our people today, where they do not recognize the traumatic experience that they have inside of them, but they do recognize the try to be like. I want to be like, I want to move like. Why we want to the other rituals. So it is how then do we take the message of this trauma that I will say we understand, but we need to be able to transmit it so that the youth who are creating havoc because they don't recognize the trauma of 500-600 years ago and its impact on them. See, if we focus on the trauma of trying to be like Mike, for a lack of a better term, and Mike wanted to be like Ike, for another term, that's what Mike wasn't just being like Mike. Mike wanted to be like Larry, for real, for real. It wasn't even an Ike, it was a Larry. It's if we take our music and then take the music that gave us movement as opposed to the music that gave us let's shake that thing, let's do that. If we begin to look at it us, then it's how do we transmit the consciousness of the trauma? Because in my work and in my life experience, folks do not recognize the traumatic experience of before slavery, then during slavery, and as slavery has continued, because they believe there's a certain level of freedom. If cognac, and I love what you said about cognac being the ritual, because in the European world, they were treated different, not better, but different. The traumatic experience is we gravitated to different and then wanted it here, not realizing that for the purposes of the public that may hear this, that the Caucasian was also trying to recapture his identity by suppressing ours, because their identity only existed because we had one and we gave them one. We gave them purpose. We gave them movement, but they have taken that away from us so that we acquiesce to their vision of what freedom is. We need to know what freedom is. We need to understand the traumatic experience that our forebears experienced in order to recognize the traumatic experience that we're having, in order to change our view that when I look at another Black man, I don't see a man, I see an object. So I agree in the concepts, and it is now how do we take the information and make it the lesson that will change the direction? Because what Marcus Messiah Garvey did was change the direction. Now we have to give the lesson that changes the direction. And I will put my hand down.
That was powerful. When you use Ike, I just went to Ike Turner in my head, and so I used to I look at Ike and Tina Turner, and I see them as Black folk who were imitating white folk who were imitating Black folk. That's a whole nother piece right there. So they did music that were like white people who were trying to be like Black folks. So when you talk about the be like part, right? We don't recognize that many times we're trying to be like somebody who already sees us as their God. That's the point I want to make, right? We don't recognize that we have already set the standard. And so we have to help our young people recognize that you are the standard bearer, right? They're the examples. We have to talk about the issue of humanization. We have to challenge what is being presented in front of them. That's the work that we do with our children in college, right? That's why I would submit that's in part why I was nominated and elected 2 years consecutively as faculty of the year and advisor of the year. There were only three possible nominations students could have given me at the institution, and I got 2 of them almost every year I was there. Why? Because we're talking about being in a space with a population, talk about affirming their beingness, right? And that is saying that here is content and here is how you make it practical. Here's what you do with it. And you mentioned, Brother Congo mentioned earlier about establishing a business. So when somebody says, I got a business, I ask the question, do you have an EIN? What's that? Now we're talking about business instruction, why it's so important. We talk about loans and how student loans can put you in a debt if you don't do it this way. And so refund check doesn't mean that you're getting a refund. It means it's advancement of payment that you got to pay back. So we talk about all of those things, those connections. But the issue is that we talk about who are you in the process of getting all this stuff done. So we don't try to overthrow this. As a matter of fact, one brother, if you look him up, Ray Mickens, when I was in graduate school, we did work at Texas A&M with a variety of athletes and talked about the issue of athletes and making money. And I never talked about how many of y'all would never go pro. Ray Mickens played a number of years in the NFL, but he also heard other things I said about what else can you do, and he bought a kiosk in a Dallas airport, and then from that kiosk, he now he owns at least 2 restaurants in the airport. The point is, there's a way of communicating this concept about your beingness in the world that translates into physical activity that creates a generational wealth process. But we have to be able to do a better job of not simply talking the lessons of history, but talking about how they live every single day around us. And that's why we are adamant about understanding, again, Ubuntu, who you're connected to, who you're tied to. What are you doing? What are you trying to do? Brother Desmond Tutu says, the bishop, he says that Ubuntu is the essence of being human. It speaks to the fact that my humanity is caught up and inextricably bound up in yours. I am human because I belong. It speaks about wholeness. It speaks about compassion. A person with Ubuntu is welcoming, hospitable, generous, willing to share. The quality of Ubuntu gives people resilience and enables them to survive and emerge despite all that comes against them. Also have a proverb that goes Ubuntu, Abanye, Abantu, which says an individual humanity identity is expressed in relationship to others. The Zulu says Umuntu, Gamuntu, Gabantu, which says a person is a person because they're other people. We have to remind our folks, not only are you here because of you, but your value and worth is predicated on who you're around, who you're with. You don't have any value and worth without somebody around you. And what is it that you all can do that makes a difference in the world? And because you are here to make a difference. And the reason why there's no difference being made, because there's no structure being shown as to how it can be done. And Brother Singer was saying earlier, certain things have been dropped, right? So we want to talk about it, we want to talk again, but if you were telling me that I can become anything I want to become, and I come back and talk about it's the white man's world, then that's double-tongued nature. You got 2 tongues talking. Well, you got to put your hands on the steering wheel when you see him, and don't look at me. Wait a minute, hold on. Wait, there's something wrong with that conversation.
Right.
And I'm understanding safety and trying to navigate a space, but where are we giving the examples?
True. And not to interrupt you, but so true.
Please do.
Not only where are we giving the examples, we have to first not just give the examples, but we need to be the example. See, if If we just talk it and not walk it, then we are not demonstrating what needs to be done. We have to show the way, not point the way. We have to walk the walk, not talk the talk.
That's
We
what I
have
mean
to
by
make
give
it
the
happen.
example.
Yes,
That's
sir.
what we're saying
Yes,
the
sir.
same thing. Give the
Yes.
example is does my life speak to what I'm saying? Right. So I need to give you an example. I need to here's the example right here, right now. I'm going to show you this. I'm going to show you a mistake that Michael Jordan made. I'm going to tell you why. Right. And I'll give the example. He came, I said, when you buy the shoes, are you buying Nike or are you buying Jordans? They said, I'm buying Jordans. Okay, that means then that who could have started the company? Jordan, because you don't even need Nike to start the company. Right. So I talk about those things. Who are they buying? So I'm saying that is an example I want to give you, but also I want to show you how my life, right, is that who am I connected to? Why am I tied to these people? Well, Doc, how do you know these people? How do you know Nick Cannon? How do you meet Taraji Henson? I'm not those people you are tied to. We're just doing the work, and our paths are having to cross, and there it is doing the work, right? And the point we're making is that is you saying live it, give it, show it, whatever the lingua franca is there an example that is tangible that they can say, I can do that too, right?
I want to jump in here if I could.
Raise a black hand.
I got mine up. Mine is dark. I don't think Baba Mosi could see it. Everybody else had a light hand up, but I got a black hand up. but it's so much that I could share, but a lot is being done right now in this reasoning, it is very, very important that we look more towards solutions, particularly, and I'm not saying that the conversation has not addressed solutions, but we spend too much time talking so much, and I'm not just talking about those of us who have come into understanding our Blacktricity, that we did not know enough of ourselves to be ourselves, to carry out the revolution that we should be. I'm talking about everybody, all Africans. Africans are $1 trillion. There's no question about it, but we don't get any of it. Somebody else is making it. We understand this. So what are the solutions? Those of us who claim to come into revolutionary thought and unity and Mobutu and Mahat need to close our ranks, get busy building, but the building needs to be done on the African continent. It is critical. That's what Garvey, that's what a lot of our ancestors pointed us to, Sheikh Anta Diop, Kwame Nkrumah. And as we do that, we have to be the example. And I think the President General said it, and you said it too, my brother, and quite a few other people. We have to be the example for others to see. And we have to have accessibility to not business, not entrepreneurship, but economic power and sovereignty to show that. That's the only way we're going to get the hoodwinked, the ignorant, and those who don't want to be, some of them don't even want to be found. And like I understand, it does not take everybody, but it does take those people who really overstand to be the example for particularly the young people that come behind us. Because if we don't do that, we are allowing our young people to become young Yorugus. And I'm serious about what I'm saying. It ain't the young people that are going astray. It ain't the young people with the problem. It's people. It's people who are African, who don't understand nationalism, Pan-Africanism, and putting it into practical example. We have so many examples of our ancestors that did that. And what we are striving to do, UNIA, ACL, RC 2020, is to rehabilitate, or the rehabilitating process of not just the UNIA, but the race in general. So this very, and I'm going to stop on this point, but this very reasoning that we're doing needs to be shared around the world. And hopefully we can fish and find some people who got inklings of Blacktricity, who want to listen to it over and over and act. Because like Roy Ayers said, it's time for the spirit of the do-do, not no-no. Do-do, meaning do something. And it's good things being done on the African continent. Many of us on this call have been in Africa. Many of us are connected. We got divisions in Africa. Many people doing good things. But we have to be that example by demonstrating to the generations that come behind us that they are moving in the direction of Yurugu and caught in the trap of the system. I ain't gonna call it white supremacy, white domination, because it's not supreme. And if we tap the spirit and tap the blacktricity, it will light us up. It will continue to educate us. I heard you say something earlier that was so important. You said your teacher, Amos Wilson. See, our ancestors are living, they still are teaching us. So it's not just picking up a book, it's really, really tapping into the work that they laid down for us and continuing that work. So that's what we're doing, rehabilitating with Garvey, Amy, and all those ancestors that came before us, because we want to be a structure. And that's what the PG was getting at. What do we do to transform and change the direction? And I know that there are people doing good things on the continent, but we don't hear about them as much because everybody's so caught up in what Yurugu is doing or not doing, or trying to be a Yurugu, or trying to be successful, or want to be like Mike. You know, man, we are so loaded with blacktricity. If you look at the NBA, they're guys that are going to be 20 times better than Michael Jordan on the court because we got it in us. But if you're not off the court doing that kind of work for your people, then it does us no good. It's an individual thing. It's not a collective thing. And then, and this is the last point, Kwanzaa. All the Nguzo Saba, those principles in the Nguzo Saba are so important. And we're doing Kwanzaa in July for our young girls down in South Carolina because it's a 24/7 thing. It ain't just doing December. And a lot of our brothers and sisters who practice Kwanzaa, they like to celebrate it rather than to emulate it. So we have to call it just like it is. But then I'm gonna stop on that point because we laying it out. We laying it out. But we gotta spread this information to others that need it because they're getting stuff that is detrimental to their health, wellness, and existence.
Thank you, Baba. Thank you, Baba. I will go back to Dr. K and then to respond to you if he needs to. And then I'll go to Brother Menk.
I just wanted to say that Brother Sankar is on point. We are doing the work on the continent. We are making the connections. We're not simply talking about it. We are in the village of the Kunta Kinte. If the narrative is what it is, a myth or not, the Nkalo, the leader, the chief of that village has given us land to do several things. And one of the things we're doing is that we're helping to revitalize a center there, a skill center to do a lot of work. And then that goes to the youth center, which goes to it goes on ad nauseum. And we can talk about the work that's been done as an example. However, if we don't deal with the mindset, and this is one of our biggest challenges, we talk about people when people were manumitted to Liberia, why they named the capital Monrovia after Monroe, because the mind hasn't been transformed. So we often talk about the work and what's being done, but if your mind is jacked, that's why my grandmother said a fool in his mind will soon part. So we have to understand those connections between getting your mind right and being in the right space. I want to just share the screen just for a moment, if I can, if you allow me to share something here. I wanted to share something from Brother Dr. Fukiao, just for a hot second, if anyone can see this. I just wanted to share something that he shared with us, and it talks about what do we do. First of all, he says that we are a cosmic living seed energy, and that we are receiving and giving stuff every single day. That we get medicine and from the earth, and then when we get spiritual energy from above us. And so this is how we are the Kalunga. This is how we are living being, and that we are Kalazima Kala, that we are coming into being, we've been extension and going out of being again. Why is this critical? Because when people recognize that you're not here forever, right? And so this Kalazima Kala, you come into being, you extinguish, and that there's this life cycle, this cosmogram, Dikanga, he presented to us to say, we recognize that you have a phase of life, a phase of rising, a phase of creativity, and then a phase of being extinguished. He says that each part of the day. Here's some practical things to do every single day that allows you to tap into your power as a being to be able to be healed. He says, recognize vumana or breath. He says, consider what it is that you are drinking in the morning, that early in the morning in pineapple, because the energy level that you have in the morning, the rising part of your day is a creative phase. And so it's about perfection and conception, and the self-healing is highest. And so drink pineapple and orange juice, and think about Vovi, what you speak in the second phase of the day. So your breath, your breathing, your speaking is the second phase of the day. Plant life and your vitality is high. Think about drinking blueberry and grape juice. And so we went through this ritual with him for 3 or 4 days. And I tell you, it allowed us to see the world differently. Then Banga means to create. And then towards the setting phase of your day, it's a dangerous phase because you're transitioning. The power energy is low, and then there's go on vacation, bunda, to die, that is to go into rest. And so then you close out the day. He gave us this idea that throughout the day, we're supposed to think about ourselves as a rising and setting sun. And I mentioned the biogenetic rope, and that we're untying certain things. When people recognize that they're untying stuff, that stuff happened before you and happened to you and happened around you, that you have to be able to move through those things, that you are not only living, but you are the afterlife and the yet to be born. These things are critical. These things have been a part of our people for generations. It's a whole piece here I wanted to, I could share, but I want to go all the way back here to what is it that we're trying to do, and how do you get things right to be able to step into phases of life where you're able to see an example. Because if my mind is not right, Brother President General, I can see, you can put it right in front of me and I can't make it happen. That's why they say you can lead a horse to water, but you can't make him drink. First of all, identify levels of implicit interpersonal, social, cultural, institutional, and geopolitical trauma that has taken place. Be able to talk about those things. Many people became awakened. Think about how we became awakened to a lot of stuff when folks told us about what was going on. That's a part of the garbage message. It's part of the Honorable Elijah Muhammad's message. We go ad nauseum. People are saying some of the same things. Here's what's happening to you. They would talk about the resetting of your nervous system. How do you manage your arousal? Because many of us are engaged in activities where we're shooting and killing and murdering one another. We're killing and shooting ourselves because we don't know how to reset our nervous system. So our work has to be about resetting that, then free the body from the impact of trauma. That is, be able to detach what happened to you to what your body is doing, because many of our cancers and other things in our body are in the various zones that actually were traumatized. Breast cancer, because women were made to be wet nurses, and prostate cancer and ovarian cancer and uterine cancer. And so we have to free the body from that, mastering the staying present. Too many times we stay in the past. The past is where there's depression, or we're afraid of the future. There is anxiety. And Dr. Amos Wilson has a powerful example of that in his book about living in the past and the present. I'm not going to go into that. Monitoring trauma symptoms. What is happening to us? And then we have to understand how to feel a full range of emotions. We have a constricted aspect of emotions. We don't want to be happy. We don't want to be sad, right? Because what are you smiling about? Why you just happy? We get upset with people being happy. Somebody a black person gets on the job and I'm tired. I'm ready to go home. How long you been here? I've been here 5 minutes. I'm ready to go. We can't even find moments of joy because we believe that if we get moments of joy, that the bad is going to happen. So we have narratives like I'm either in a storm, coming out of a storm, or going into a storm. So life is grounded in storm mentality. So many times we can show our children what to do, but they don't believe it's possible because they know that something bad is going to always happen to blackness. So we have to talk about feeling the full range of emotions. That's why when they take pictures, they looking all hard and stuff because they can't feel joy, they can't feel peace, they can't feel love because it's been beaten out of us. Coming to peace with memories, right? Things that have happened to us in the past, coming to terms with events. These things happen, and now what are you going to do about it? Filling in what is missed, the parts of us that have been missed out, and how do we fill it in? One of the ways we can fill it in is through African ancestry. We can get our DNA stuff together. We can do all those kind of things to start filling in the gaps. One brother I know is filling in so many gaps in his life. He grew up thinking that the man who was his daddy, he realized later that the man he thought was his daddy was was not his dad, and the man thought it was his dad's best friend was actually his father. And that thing messed his whole life up, and he's a drug heroin addict, and now he's putting his life together again by doing his genealogical work, and he's becoming whole again, right? And then the idea of altruism, giving to others. How do you give to others? And now we're at a point where you talk about the business, talk about creating a reality, because now you feel better. So you start giving to others, taking people over to the country, seeing that they're tied to something greater than simply the oppression in the United States, right? And the activities that we can engage in for healing, the dance, the drum, the nomo, the spoken word, all those things happen. And that we understand that we are a trifold being. And I'm gonna close out here that we are a trifold being radiating in 7 distinct directions, that we radiating inward. The idea of how do we heal rightward, connect with the family and loved ones, frontward to prepare for the children, downward, the getting out of the earth and soil to live better, leftward to check for our enemies, backwards to discover our collective accumulated wealth and dig up our ancestors, and then upward, the idea of creativity. And again, if you think about our line dances that we've done, not line dances, our various dances that we do at the family reunion, the electric slide, everything else, they go in 7 distinct directions, and you can have all generations out there. This very image right here, we're doing the healing work, but we have to understand the power of Sankofa. And so there's ritual that we have to engage in that we don't have time to elaborate on. But what I will say is that if a person's mind is not right, we can go ad nauseum trying to stop sharing, escape. We can do a lot of things, but we have to do some purging, stop sharing, of certain things that have been destructive to our psychological well-being. And so, whereas we've gotten to a point, we've done some Sankofa work ourselves, every last one of you all, everywhere, I've spoken with everybody basically, either before now or right now, and I can see you all done Sankofa work. So that part of that work has already been done. You clean, you purge, you clear. But the real question becomes, how do we pass that on to the next generation? And we have to be examples of cleanliness in our organizations. Are we fighting, feuding over power? Are we power tripping? Are we moving folks in the right direction? We have organizations right now that's designed to help and heal our folks, but there's more ego tripping in the organization than actually elevation of the population. So I used to do this work, some similar work, brother President General, with brothers coming out of prison reentry program, and I just knew I was deep. And dude said, "Doc, can we eat that shit?" And I had to stop and think about what he was saying. He was saying, "Is it practical?" That was your exact question. What makes it relevant? And so the relevancy of the moment is not us talking about it, but us being about it. How do we come together as brothers and sisters and do the work? How do we tie into the work with the Dasi and setting up shrines and or altars so that people can recognize who they're connected to? How do we tie into the UNIA and deal with the Pan-African agenda? How do we tie into this organization, that organization that's doing the work and building? So every person can't see the same thing the same way. If that was the case, then we would call President General God and we all go home. But because we all have something to see differently, that's the idea of recognizing the journey. So when we come together and say, brother, have you thought about this? I hadn't thought about that. So now how do we do this? Or I tell you, here's what I'm doing. Oh, well, let's do this way, right? And so the point you're doing that, well, let me tie into that. But many times what we do, Mama Tendai, is that we tell somebody what we're doing, we start hating on one another. That's what you were saying, Brother Sengar, about Yurugu. We break up hating on one another as opposed to figuring out, okay, now tell me what you're doing again. Okay, let me see what I can do to help that. And then let me tell you what I'm doing. And so what you do can help me with that. And now we are building. But you can never write a book by every time somebody writes a page, you tear that page out and write another page. Right? And so all you have is simply a book cover with no pages. And that's how we live. Because we've learned from our oppressor that there's nothing good coming out of any of us. So we become big oppressors than they are. So we have to do the healing work. And that's what we talked about is the realignment part, the regulated emotions, those kind of things. When we get to that part, then we can begin to do some other work. So I just wanted to make sure that at least we talk about some of the healing aspects of the work. And now we're free to go do the work. That's why it says you're free to move about the cabin. Once you're flying in the plane, then you're free to move. You can't move until you get lifted up yet first. And too many times you want to jump around and move. Hold on, you got to sit your butt still because it's turbulent right now. Buckle in. But now when we're flying, you're free to move about the cabin.
That's powerful, brother. Very powerful. Brother Mink, you had your hand up for quite some time, so go right ahead. You're muted.
So all the discussion about what it takes for us to gain health at the individual level and looking at the practical application of our healthy people. And I raised the question, what does it mean not to be ruled? And Nkrumah told us what we had to do, and the most practical example was that we have to have political parties that are able to come to power throughout the African continent. So these healthy people have to be able to raise to that political agenda to actually have Black power. And that Black power has to have an economic military component that goes along with that. And that's the larger agenda on the practical level of what does it mean not to be ruled and to rule yourself and to feed yourself and to clothe yourself. The last time we had that in Africa was in the 1400s, when the Kingdom of Mali was the wealthiest nation on this earth. I'll leave it there.
And yet we put clothes on everybody in the world. We give everybody something to eat. We give everybody music. We give everybody wealth. When we start showing our children and our children's children, do you know that they got this from you and your ancestors? That's a practical example. Put the example right out there. What? There's no music. Rap music is an invention out of an African reality in New York. But it was before then, the griot, the storyteller, the narrative. It's imperative that we show those examples, that the Black eye, this is why we start with very practical things. Did you know that the cotton was first created into fabric on the continent, and then they brought Africans here? That means that they put together a dream team to build their country. That means then that in your DNA is the essence of what has always been. I'm close to say that if cotton, again, was king, and the cotton came from African people, and it takes a king to make a king, then Africans made Europeans kings. It's time to just go take your stuff back. That's it. We take it back. We take back all the information. We don't have to, we fight too hard for something that's very simple. We started with the music. We started with the production. We started with the inventions that I mentioned early on. Do you know that without the GPS, I asked the question, how many of y'all can get around without GPS? I don't know, I'd be lost. A Black woman invented that, right? That's an example. You try too hard. That's an example of African genius. The issue is that, as you said earlier, Senghor, we're not building economic wealth from what we're doing because we're giving it away. In relationships, you just can't give stuff away in a relationship and expect them to have you got to put, you don't give everything away in a relationship. That's all I'm gonna say about that. You got to put conditions. All right, I had to stop myself. Everybody know what I just said. You got to put terms and conditions on what you're giving up. And you follow what I'm saying, President General? We just give it up, right? And then expect you gonna respect me. No, I'm not gonna respect you. That's why they say what? Why are you gonna buy the cow when you get the what? The milk for free.
I,
All right.
And
Anyway,
is
I'm
that your
done.
closing
I'm done.
statement?
Yeah.
well, see,
I'll
I
go
knew
to the
that was,
PG. PG,
I knew
you
that
had your
was
hand up.
coming.
I'll go to you. Dr. Mwata
Yeah,
has closed, and I thank you very much, my brother. That was
okay.
very, very good. And
Um,
Brother Congo mentioned something though. It may be some sisters on the
yeah,
line.
well, the sister, that's a
wait,
powerful sister.
but,
If she wants to say
but,
something, she'll put her hand up,
but,
or she will jump in.
but,
But
but
so I go to the President General, and
to,
on that,
and the
she put
sister
her
done
hand
put her
up.
hand up. Just so
Oh, she
you
got
know,
her
she
hand
done
up.
put her hand up. See, you said that, but let
Pardon,
me,
pardon me, PG. The female energy came up on.
okay, you want me to, I'll wait.
I will have you close as soon as she's done.
I was just,
Mama Tendai.
I was just going to say this is only part one. This
Yeah.
part one.
Mm.
Okay, so we got to move into the next section, which is part two, which are all the different things you see that Dr. Mwata has up there to be able to move forward on to assist us in this process so that we can have tangible outcomes and results from the things that we're talking about, because he's making it very clear that where we are, and in reality, it begins with spirit, and that's who we are as an African people. That's the essence of who we are above anything and everybody else. And that's what we have to draw on to be able to move forward. I put in the chat that our community is our immunity.
Yes, you did.
Okay.
Thank you, my sister.
You put our immunity is our community.
Yeah.
Yes, I no 100%, 1000%. My brother, in his closing remarks, highlighted most of the problems and yet provided solutions. Let me say that. He highlighted the problem, provided a solution. I wish there was more time for the slides that you showed on your screen, because there's more lessons in those slides that our community needs. And if we are to, no, since we are to carry forth the message of the most honorable Marcus Messiah Garvey, whose ancestral spirit is connected far beyond any dynasty that we want to point to, because our African culture was not developed and rooted into dynasties. That all came about because of the first century, which was 7,000 years after we had created the world, that the Urugu, who was the cousin that we kicked the hell out of Africa and therefore came back vengeful. I just want to add that, because we don't teach our truth, but we've had women and men that taught our truth, and you've made reference to them throughout this conversation. And because this conversation is geared toward trauma, I wanted to make sure that, as my brother's going to tell me, these are my closing remarks, that we recognize the trauma that we are challenging, because our incarceration, I don't like the word enslavement, because of our incarceration, we have, and what has been talked about tonight and explained expertly, we have conceptualized that we need to be like them. If you look at the violence in our community, it is representative of being like them. Okay, we said being like Mike, but it's being like them, because Mike was being like them. Understand, we have acquiesced to that which took away our humanity and accepted a negative humanity, which is why we don't recognize what the body can do to address the challenges that it faces, which is why we succumb to the illnesses that could be corrected just really based on who we are and doing what our ancestral people taught us to do. Sankofa, reach back, pull forward. We won't reach back. What we do is we reach as far as slavery, and that's what we pull forward. But what we don't recognize is the slavery that you reach to is a result of the freedom that you had that threatened the entire European concept. And when you realize that you threatened their very being because they came from us, and they want us to believe we came from them. The challenge is taking the lessons, teaching it to our youth, and then having them teach the youth that come behind them, and then manifest the greatness of our ancestors. Marcus Messiah Garvey, in his time, put forth the message, "Up, you mighty people, you can accomplish what you will. If you will it, it will be." We have to understand freedom is not what you see. It's not being connected to a company, a franchise, a government. Freedom is the ability to define and direct your people, your ancestral people, your children, your future people in the direction that your ancestral people directed you. We were born in freedom as a race. We must live in freedom as a people. And I make that specific definition, people, not race, because in essence, we must move ourselves back to freedom as a race, which means I see me in each and every last one of you and feel you in me. I am because you are. And because you are, therefore I am. I can't be without you. You won't be without me. You may not know me who hear this. You may not have known me before today, but I was already a part of you because you are already a part of me. Thank you, my brother. The challenge we face is teaching this lesson. Baba Mosey.
Thank you very much, PG. I have to say that our greetings, Mama Mary. I have to say that this is one of the most enjoyable of the series of Freedom Friday Forum that we've had. I have learned quite a bit, and I know Dr. Mwata, don't be surprised if before the year ends, there is another call, because somebody has already said part 2. And so I will have to acquiesce to that. So that's the Minister of Education of the UNIA-ACL Rehabilitating Committee 2020. And he'll work from a lot of our recommendations when it comes to dealing with educating our people and educating ourselves. So thank you again. Thank you everyone who are on the call, everyone who's on the Facebook page, who are watching as we stream it. I greet you and I bid you a good night. And until next time, one God, one aim,
One aim,
one destiny.
destiny.
One destiny.
Yes, indeed.
One destiny.
Amandala.
All right.
Amandala.
So,
He's
Mandela.
He's
Wait,
Yes.
related to.
Luta continua.
Aluta continua. Yebo.
So, Baba Mosey, you're gonna drop the Facebook?